Enjoying a peaceful day under the shade of a tree, a young red-haired girl takes a bite out of her delicious sandwich. She gets greeted by an older nobleman who had to comment he couldn't resist dishes he's never seen before. He kindly asked for a bite. The girl happily opened her basket, offering him an array of choices to choose from. And with one bite of the same style of sandwich she was eating, he had to comment that it was salted perfectly and the spices left him wanting more. He could eat this forever. The umami of the meat was truly incredible, but when he asked what kind it was, he never expected her to answer backhorn, as in the monster. Away from her, he puked it up at a tree, unable to believe he ate something so dreadful. Backhorns were beasts with a powerful poison. He couldn't understand why a noble lady like her would be eating something like that, but then remembered she might be the one that he's heard of. Meanwhile, she was delighted he enjoyed it so much. With sufficient preparation, even the foulest monster meat could be made delicious. She knew no one understood it, but believed one day someone would. At a get-together in Praven Park, our heroine, Malfiria Marchalraid. What in the fictitious Japanese Victorian era name is this? Anyways, she enjoyed a delicious bite of her food. His Majesty's banquet didn't disappoint. Every dish was refined and first class in both appearance and flavor. Her attendant, Mrs. Talbot, had to scold and remind her why she was here. The purpose of this banquet, held by King Langdaeus on this fine autumn day, in celebration of a good harvest for nobles to sample wares. In other words, it's an opportunity to meet potential partners. And with Malfiria being the daughter of a count, she was on the menu herself, here to find a fiancé. But honestly, none of her friends were here, and she was hardly interested. However, her stepmother told her if she didn't find a fiancé within the year, she'd be sent to a convent. Even her father was willing to accept anyone at this point, as long as they were a decent person. So, she attended upon their insistence. But the others here only gossiped about how she was unapproachable despite her lovely face. She ran away, feeling ashamed because everyone avoided her. Heading into the area where there were more knights than nobles, she thought to maybe look for a fiancé here, perhaps someone who didn't know her. She suddenly heard a woman scream about a monstrous beast, and everyone began to flee. She spotted a nearby elderly couple. The man's cane broke, and he couldn't walk, so Mel offered to help. But unfortunately, the monster would appear right behind her. It was a backhorn. These normally didn't appear in inhabited areas. She decided to lure the monster away from the couple, with her inadequacies running through her mind. She failed to find a fiancé, and now this. She didn't want to die here. Then suddenly, a silver-haired man would slice through the monster with his blade. In the blink of an eye, Aristide Rogier du Galbraith, the blood-mad Duke, had saved her. Somewhat deviously, he asked, "What is it? Do I scare you?" She gulped, slaughtering beasts to slake his thirst for blood. The blood-mad Duke was said to be an eccentric fiend, but in Mel's eyes, he was so beautiful. She gasped, getting up to tell him she was glad to see he was in good health. He came off as pretty aloof, asking if she was oblivious to the situation. But seeing the blood near his mouth, she quickly shifted things into asking him to rinse it, going into a rant about how Backhorn's blood may be completely corrupted with magic toxins. And while a live beast's blood was untainted, swallowing toxins could cause fevers or intense stomach pain. If it hadn't been mad, its blood could have been used to make sausages. He interrupted her rambling to mention she seemed quite knowledgeable, and only now did she realize she was getting deep into the weeds of it. She began to bow over and over to apologize, but he'd suddenly offer purified water so that she could be cured of any potential magic toxins. He then tried to take her away for her to get new clothes she could borrow, but she didn't want to impose, mentioning it was no worse than when she butchered a beast last week. He was stunned. He asked her name, so she bowed again, introducing her full title, and this made him laugh. He's heard of her. She was the girl who eats monsters, the voracious villainess. In this world, there were magical beasts and unusual plants known as monsters, which were different from standard creatures. Due to the magic power they contained, consuming it might cause vomiting, stomach pain, and fevers. For this reason, they were typically disposed of once slain. Being the voracious villainess, she felt it'd be silly to hide it now. She explained she wasn't actually interested in monsters, just food. He could hardly believe that beast looked edible to her. However, she licked her lips in affirmation. She couldn't help but wonder how she could prepare it to make it delicious. The Duke looked like he'd never seen anyone like her before. She felt she screwed up again. So she tried smiling, and it seemed effective, even though she perceived it as backfiring. He then took her hand again, and she thought, is this man not afraid of me? Now, far enough away, he had to ask if beast meat really was good, and how it tasted. She'd gotten this question before. Her answers usually ended with people finding her creepy. She described backhorn meat as a similar texture to beef, and very delicious. Since it was wild game, she put extra effort into tenderizing it. Then, it could be roasted or stewed. He was surprised, and now concluded that as long as the beast wasn't mad, its magical flesh wouldn't upset the stomach. She was surprised he caught on so quickly. She'd never gotten a reaction like this before from someone. He actually listened to what she had to say. She was so happy. She then explained that to make monster meat safe for consumption, the magic must first be removed by bleeding out with special tools. He then uttered her name, making her blush, as he asked her to prepare something for him sometime. Aw, they're pretty cute. With him grabbing her hands, she thought about how she's never met anyone like him, and he honestly couldn't wait to try everything she had to offer. At the House Galbraith Pavilion, he ordered his servant, Caus LaForge, to bring Mel a change of clothes. And then in another tent, he prepared a tub with water she could wash her face and hands in while she waited. She again didn't want to impose, and since she was mostly unscathed, she suggested he wash up first. And whoa, we go into the shirtless scene right away? Mel was caught off guard. Seen knights and hunters wash outdoors before, but she wasn't immune to this, and yet she couldn't look away. Eris asked if something was wrong, and she couldn't help but reply that his physique was remarkable. He was a bit bashful, answering, "Oh, yes, I suppose. I do train." Mel detailed his magnificent display with the sword earlier. While washing up together, she asked if she could learn to behead a beast as well. He thought it was possible once you get the hang of it, but she wouldn't be swinging a blade with her slender arms. He told her to leave the fighting to him. She had to ask what he meant by that, and now he was flustered, quickly washing his hands and making the excuse he was just used to it. He turned it into offering to hunt down any monster she'd like to try, making her excited, because the great forest in his duchy was like the holy land of monsters, home to many rare species not found in her family's domain. The two got a bit touchy-feely with removing the blood off each other's faces, before Caus interrupted them, asking his lord how he could sit half naked before a young lady. Eris answered he wasn't completely exposed. However, Caus found it a hardly appropriate sight for the unmarried daughter of a count. Mel came out in a fresh, flowery dress, one that the Duke had borrowed from the Queen. She was gushing on the inside over how unbelievably cool he looked holding a monster's head, and all of Eris's men were shocked. Normally, when presenting a monster's head to a lady, they'd faint. These two seemed like the perfect fit. Saying their goodbyes in the evening, the Duke mentioned next time he'd bring her a well-marbled royal moodle. The thought of it made Mel drool. She shook her head, thinking she was being naughty, possibly imposing him with her desires. She then told him the beast would taste better if captured alive, and he was willing to rise to the challenge. They said the blood-mad Duke was a bloodthirsty fiend, but she could tell now the rumors really were just talk. She saw him as a kind soul. From inside her carriage, she offered him a basket containing jerky from Skitspit, a beast from her family's territory. He took a bite immediately, and Caus was not happy that he didn't have it go through a taste tester first, telling him to spit it out. Eris then shoved it in Caus's mouth, and the servant described a strong flavor with umami that spread throughout the mouth. It was delicious, and now Eris was hopeful for other beast dishes. Mel's eyes widened. She's creeped people out before. They've spread malicious rumors about and shunned her. She ducked below her window to let her tears run. She felt the Duke was too kind. Saying their goodbyes again, she assumed he was just being polite. Perhaps just curious to know what monsters tasted like, what the rumored beast-eating voracious villainess was like. But she wondered, just maybe, she could get her hopes up a little. By the time Mel returned to her family's territory, it was already winter. She was surprised to see her father by the gate, waving to her and running towards the carriage. As he opened the door, He asked his daughter what she had done. She was confused, asking what he meant, but immediately bowed. And before she could apologize for not finding a fiancé, her father reminded her that she was a lady of the Marshall Raid family, and not suitable for a duke. He asked why the Duke of Galbraith was asking for her hand. Mel mistook this for the Duke literally needing hands, but her father made it clear the Duke was seeking her hand in marriage. He was distraught, wondering how to respond to the Duke's letter. But Mel was dripping with cold sweat all over her face, feeling even more flustered. Meanwhile, Eris reported to His Highness about the hunters having wound up in a monster den, and the beast within contained a great deal of magic toxins. But he was able to uphold his duty without any casualties. With this, His Highness, Maxim du Liverstol Meerd Langdius, had nothing to fear. However, Maxim wanted Eris to refer to him as Brother Maxim, like he used to. Eris immediately refused. They may be brothers by blood, but 17 years ago, when Maxim was made the crown prince, Eris became his subject and was adopted by the Galbraiths. He explained that there had to be a clear line drawn between them. With that being said, Maxim asked Eris about the basket in his hand, but Eris threw it off, telling him to pay it no mind. Maxim then teased, knowing everything about his dear younger brother, including about a certain redhead. Eris would gasp in shock, giving his brother a chance to swipe a jerky from the basket. And after a bite, Maxim loved the taste and asked what kind of jerky it was. Eris told him it was scatspit jerky, leaving His Highness surprised that it was actually made from those tiny monsters. It tasted even better than 3-star beef. When Maxim asked if it was made by the voracious villainess, Eris gave him her proper name. Maxim began teasing his brother, asking what he would do about this, since it wasn't often he hit it off with someone right from the start. However, Eris ignored him and left the tent. Still, he felt his brother might be right. It wasn't often he took to anyone upon meeting them, and he was still shocked that the lady with the flaming red hair was actually the voracious villainess. Where was she hiding such a bold heart and a delicate frame? Not only was she unafraid of the monster, but Eris thought she looked beautiful, even with its blood on her. He was instantly captivated by her. Kaus then reported that they had brought the Backhorn's habitat under their control. He then teased the Duke, asking if Mel would be joining them at future banquets. Eris asked if he was the one who informed Maxim about their encounter, but Kaus played dumb. Alone in the woods, Eris figured Mel didn't believe when he said he'd bring her a gift, and knew she thought he was just being polite. Recalling the tears he saw in her eyes back then, he vowed to never make her make that face again. Over at Mel's home, she wondered if the Duke had really sent the letter in such a luxurious jeweled case. Her father told her a messenger had come 7 days ago on a blaze eagle bearing the Galbraith family crest. Hearing this, Mel was shocked and jealous, wishing she could have seen the creature herself. He then asked her what really happened at the banquet, and her answer remained the same. She was attacked by a magic beast, and the Duke saved her. The letter read that the Duke had a rewarding time with Mel at the banquet, and would like to request her hand in marriage. Wondering how serious the Duke was, Mel felt he might have an ulterior motive. They needed a good reason to turn down a formal proposal from the Duke. But for now, her father would send a response. Later, Mel thought her father was right, considering she and the Duke had never met before the banquet. They just got excited about enjoying monster meat. And that's when it hit her. The earnest Duke had no one to share his desire to try monster meat with. Until now, Mel understood how meaningless it felt with no one to talk to. Being a kindred spirit, she wanted the Duke to feel free to discuss his culinary curiosities with her. Suddenly, the letter glowed golden with magic, and Mel heard a personalized message from the Duke about how boring the banquet was for him after she left. He promised to visit her before the depths of winter, on the 18th day of the month of Sirius. And the 18th was tomorrow! Mel couldn't blame her father for being so flustered. She was too, with her heart pounding. After all, the Duke was coming the next day. She wondered if the Duke was really coming to propose to her. He didn't have to do all that just to try monster meat. Mel got into bed, holding a picture of her and her mother, and thinking about if the Duke would accept the viability of monster meat. Of all their work, her mother wanted to enrich the lives of people who lived in their cold and barren land. Mel inherited this research from her mother, and no matter how long it takes, she would force the world to recognize it. To that end, she had to make monster meat exceptionally delicious. The next morning, her stepmother, Countess Celia, entered her room, not happy to see that she wasn't ready. Mel was too scared to tell her she had only just woken up. Celia talked down on her for disgracing her noble status. Suddenly, the roar of a beast startled her. Mel ran to the window and saw a flock of glacial dragons, which Eris rode on. He came closer to the window, clarifying he was here for her hand, and naturally, he brought the gift he had promised. Mel would ask him to have the dragons land in the pasture to the north, while she finished her preparations. After closing the window, she buried her face in the curtain, completely flustered at how dashing Eris looked. The way he expertly rode the dragon was stunning. Moreover, it was a glacial dragon, which she'd never seen before. They were so different from the dragonlings around her family's territory. Celia interrupted her thoughts, telling Mel to inform her father that she wasn't feeling well. She was furious at Eris for showing up on a dragon, and now understood why people called him the Blood-Mad Duke. Mel then stopped her stepmother, letting her know that she did intend to accept the Duke's proposal with pleasure. When she met up with Eris, she explained she had only come back from the capital yesterday. She was still worried about her hair, but felt it would be worse to make the Duke and his men wait. Kaos would then apologize for the sudden visit, explaining that the Duke couldn't wait to see her again. Eris then asked where to deliver the gift. Seeing that there was actually a monster in the bag, she was so excited. She couldn't believe he actually brought one. Mel thanked him dearly and asked if she could take a peek. Getting closer to the bag, she noticed the monster wasn't moving and wondered if he had killed it. Eris took off the cover for her to see by herself. Looking at those horns and its golden fur, Mel had no doubts it was a royal moodle. Her eyes sparkled with joy. Moodles were white monsters with 2 spiral horns and 1 sharp pointed horn on their foreheads. Their beautiful pelts were highly prized, and royal moodles with golden fur were particularly valuable. However, their meat always got discarded, and Mel saw that as a waste. Seeing this specimen was quite rare, she asked Eris if he really wanted to give it to her. And of course he did. Grabbing her hand, he moved it close to the monster's heart, showing that it was still beating and alive. Mel realized he had put it to sleep with magic. She started fantasizing about the meat she would make, wondering if she should cut it thick, grill it, or stew it, or if she should roast it since it's marbled. She could use the different parts to enjoy a variety of dishes. Mel couldn't thank the Duke enough, feeling overjoyed at receiving such a wonderful gift. Soon after, Mel's father came to properly greet the Duke. She nearly forgot he had come here to ask for her hand in marriage. She would ask her father to allow the dragons hunt in the Bartos Mountains. He had no problems, but wondered if the moodle wasn't food for the dragons. To his surprise, it was for Mel. He was even more surprised the Duke already knew her taste. She also asked that they open the research facility, and Eris cut in, claiming he understood Mel to some degree, and despite the cruel rumors about her, his proposal still stood. However, Mel's father would be shocked to hear the moodle was still alive. The Duke wanted to see it being prepared, and his request was granted. Mel was then asked to show Eris to the research facility. Flying on the Duke's dragon, she was thrilled, and even found the dragon's cry cute. Seeing her mother's research facility again, she was a bit nervous, but thought her father would be relieved if the Duke accepted her. The first step was showing the Duke what she did in the research facility. She needed him to see everything, and it made her wonder if he would still be interested in her after seeing why she was so interested in eating monsters. At the research facility, Eris was shocked to see a magic circle written in ancient magic script. Mel's mother had created this, and Mel herself had improved on it. The inscription on it read, "I am the one who takes your life and sustains myself on your body." Seeing she used this to drain the magic from monsters, Eris asked if it wasn't difficult to do, using only the magic circle. Mel affirmed this, stating that draining magic from monsters required an additional tool. She would lead him to a warehouse where she brought out a cloudy quartz flask that she used for draining monsters' blood and magic. Eris was quite impressed. With its craftsmanship, the flask looked regular now, but her magic would change its color and luster. Then, Mel shyly asked the Duke for a favor. She'd like to see him behead a beast once again. Getting ready to prepare the royal moodle, Mel found it challenging to clean such a large beast by herself. So, she asked the Duke's men to assist her. On his signal, the men surrounded the beast, shearing its fur. In addition to slaying monsters, the Knights of Galbraith were also responsible for harvesting horns, claws, and pelts as resources. They were even skilled at shearing. When they were done, Mel played with the fluffy fur. She claimed the thread spun from this fur was premium enough to present to the royal family. but her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she was more interested in seeing what was inside the beast. She drooled, just thinking about how tasty a marbled royal moodle would be. However, Mel never wasted a life. She said a quick prayer, promising to treat the beast's precious life with care until the very end. She would then cast a spell, activating the magic circle, and gave Eris permission to proceed. In one swing, he cleaved the head of the monster. It was too fast for Mel's eyes to follow. No matter how many times she saw it, his swordsmanship was breathtaking. She was so impressed. Next, she proceeded to remove the monster's magic energy. As she chanted a spell, she began glowing brightly alongside the flask, and the monster's blood began flowing into it. Eris was stunned and speechless, but suddenly, the flask cracked. This had never happened before. One flask wouldn't be enough, but Mel couldn't let go now. Eris quickly came to help her. She explained the magic energy was too much and asked him to switch out the flask with a spare one. After he did so, she confirmed the spare flask would be enough, and soon she completed the spell. The Duke was surprised that the monster still looked plump. Mel told him she made sure not to let the meat dry out. Retaining moisture was the key to delicious meat. Eris was impressed and asked if she came up with the method, and she'd answer it was her mother. They've experienced terrible droughts and famines. 17 years ago, their people were starving. The Marshall Raid's lands were poor in resources, and the soil was barely fertile. So, Mel's mother began researching how to make use of their abundant monster population. If the process were made simple for anyone to use, it'd transform monsters from a nuisance to a tasty food source, and save the people. After her mother's death, Mel took over her research. Although lately, she seemed to be having a lot of fun sampling rare monsters. Eris then asked what she'd do with all the drained monster blood, to which she replied that she would use it to make fires. She wouldn't need fuel for cooking or lights in the research facility for 2 months. He then asked if that's all she'd use it for, and she wondered if there was another use for it. He couldn't help but laugh. He complimented that she was fine, just the way she was, and stated that her research was far more useful than what the court mages were doing. The magic energy in the flask could be used to create a weapon to destroy nations. Mel had no idea though, since she only ever handled monsters the size of jackals and tacos. Eris pointed out that rumors were just rumors, but when they were said with malice and took on a life of their own, they could cause unimaginable tragedy. No matter what people said, he promised he would show them no mercy if they tried to hurt her. However, he felt like the rumors of her drinking fresh blood were true. Mel denied it, but he teased that she looked like a vampire. Actually, he was bewitched by her beautiful, flaming red hair and green eyes that shone brighter than beryl. He genuinely felt he'd be willing to give his life for her. Mel was flustered and told him to stop teasing her. Still blushing hard, she complimented how his eyes looked beautiful when they glittered with magic energy, and that he looked marvelous with his coat fluttering behind him on his dragon. And so, the two were left flush. While feeding the dragons, Eris's hunt permit came in. Apparently, the royal moodle's organ meat wouldn't be enough for his dragons, given they were quite gluttonous. His stomach would then growl, leaving him embarrassed. She turned their attention to the tasty-looking moodle meat, which he was eager to try, and this was their only chance to have it fresh. Mel suggested slicing a bit from themselves and broiling it. They were more than enough for them to try the finer cuts. After they prepared the meat, Eris sprayed some spice onto Mel's hand. Upon tasting it, she lit up at its deliciousness. The aroma of the fresh herbs alone was enough to whet one's appetite, and the touch of salt was exquisite. Apparently, it was a ground blend of various spices, which Eris had swiped from the head chef. Mel made it clear they were only tasting this for poison. Of course they weren't sneaking a bite, but to be safe, she said they'd have to cook the first ones thoroughly. Eris saw this as unbearable torture, but it had to be done to ensure the best experience. Staring at the tasty meat, they were already drooling, but they still needed to turn them over and cook them again. Kaus would approach them, causing them to panic. The Duke handed him the permit, asking him to go feed the dragons, but Kaus asked him to go tag along. Eris replied he was busy with Mel. Then Kaus began teasing him for leaving his hungry crew to sneak a bite, so Eris would have no choice but to offer him a skewer. However, they still had the rest of the knights to feed. Kaus explained to Mel that the knights had only been eating dreadful monster meat, and he pleaded that she give them the honor of sampling the meat for poison. Afterwards, Kaus tried to taste the one Eris was holding, but the Duke refused. He then teased Eris for holding onto it because it was the first one Mel had cooked for him. Eris became flustered, and they started arguing. Mel then gave Kaus a skewer to taste, and as he took a bite, she was freaking out on the inside, curious to know how it tasted. Kaus then told her it wasn't gamey at all. Also, it melted and filled the mouth. It could practically be called a beverage. Eris could barely endure the torture any longer. Although it didn't upset Kaus' stomach, he mentioned that it takes time for magic to cause a stomachache. So, the Duke was left devastated. Mel had never gotten an upset stomach from magic toxins, and wasn't able to speak on the matter. But according to those who have, symptoms could appear immediately or as late as overnight. Hearing this, Eris knew he couldn't wait. He needed to have some now. His knights also agreed with him. Mel, as well, couldn't hold back anymore. She felt they all needed to have some before it got cold, and even if they got sick, they'd prepare medicine right away. So, she shared skewers with everyone, and they all took a bite. Immediately, they were mesmerized by how delicious it was. Even when slightly cooled, the fat hadn't solidified, and the meat was still juicy. Since the moodle was a herbivore, it had the rich, palate-bathing essence of fruit. Eris praised Mel for being a genius, but she gave all the honor to her mother's research. The Duke never thought monster meat could be this delicious. He only had terrible experiences since he never prepared them properly. And he didn't want to think of all the monster meat he had to discard up until now. When he tried sneaking another bite, Mel approached him. He'd panic, but she mentioned that she was thinking about heading into the lab. Upon entering the lab, Eris was amazed by how incredible it looked. He could tell it was an archetypal research lab. He then took a look at the scat-spit spike Mel used in traps for capturing monsters. The Duke asked if the knights helped her in hunting monsters, and she replied that they did sometimes. Other times, she enlisted hunters from a nearby village. However, she often hunted alone. This made him question if the Count and the people took issue with her research. And Mel knew she couldn't stand in the way of their beliefs. She knew very well that everyone had complicated feelings about her and her mother's research. Even the people her mother saved from starvation hid the fact that they survived by eating monster meat. Eris referred to this as animism, or the belief that all objects, natural phenomena, and the universe itself possesses a soul or monster. In Mel's family's territory, there were many who believed in animism, which prohibited the consumption of monsters. Still, she couldn't live without her mother's research. Eris asked why she hadn't given up, seeing that the people didn't believe in her work. Mel then asked if he recalled what happened 17 years ago. He did, because it was the reason he was adopted out as a ward. He took her by the hand over to the couch and asked her to sit beside him. Then, he asked her how she became the voracious villainess. To this, Mel would refer to him as Your Grace, but he'd prefer she call him by his name. He reminded her that he was here for her hand in marriage. Plus, he had done some research on her family. Mel saw herself as a girl with a questionable past, who was shunned by high society. She believed she'd be a burden if he married her. But Eris didn't want Mel to give up on her research, and stated with the Galbraith family, she could research to her heart's content. He wanted to know more about her. He wanted to know how she felt about him. Being the blood-mad Duke, he wondered if she feared him. He slaughtered monsters, lived soaked in their blood, and was Duke only in name. Mel was now speechless, realizing what he actually meant. Mel wouldn't dream of calling Eris scary. She told him he was quite gallant and handsome. This made him blush. He asked if she was sure, and Mel was confident that 10 out of 10 people would agree. He then looked away from her, making her wonder if she had screwed up again. She then complimented his hair, saying it was beautiful, like the color of the moonlight. When his amber eyes glowed with magic, it made her heart race. It didn't disturb her at all. The image of his golden eyes as he beheaded that backhorn was seared into her memory. Eris felt she was perhaps bewitched by the sight, but he was wrong. She would never forget his intensity. Mel mentioned that he was fulfilling an important role by slaying monsters, so she saw no reason why it would bother her. And while Eris saw himself as someone without a shred of class, she told him his work brought peace not only to the people of Galbraith, but to the whole nation. There was nothing more noble than that. He then asked what she thought of him as a fiancé, and she had never considered it. She thought that a duke would more than suffice if they got engaged, and if anything, the difference in their stations was a problem. Staring at his dazzling face, Mel began to think about what it would be like to spend every day with him. She was gushing on the inside, thinking about his sexy voice telling her, "Good morning," and "Good night," except she felt she was bound to seem inferior standing next to him. since she was only ever interested in her research. She just wanted a partner who would let her do her thing. In other words, as long as her father gave his blessings, she'd get to spend her days in paradise. Mel then asked Eris why he picked her. She couldn't imagine his people would accept if he were to marry the monster-eating, voracious villainess. However, he claimed his people would. He brought up the Urzine Woods, which was a large forest in Galbraith's lands and a treasure trove of monsters. No matter how many he hunted, the monsters kept coming, and he found it hard to dispose of their carcasses. Where monsters ran rampant, magic power accumulated, which eventually generated magic toxins that drove the monsters mad. He had to continue his hunt to prevent this. This was the fate of those who inherited the Galbraith name. Monsters were merely his quarry. It came as a shock to him, hearing Mel excitedly talk about wanting to eat them, and seeing how she prepared the royal moodle. Hers was a novel perspective. Eris's people had never thought there was a way to thoroughly drain monsters of their magic. She saw this as her only strength, but he didn't see it that way. After all, she was turning nuisance monsters into a valuable source of food. This made him certain she would be welcomed. If her and her mother's research saw the light of day, that was all she needed. The Duke vowed that with him, she would want for nothing more. He could protect her from all kinds of malice, and wanted to use her knowledge to help the people of Galbraith. Staring into his eyes, she wondered if he meant this. Was it okay for her to get her hopes up? She thought of this as a contract between her and the Duke, with no bittersweet romance involved. She would be delighted by his generous offer, and felt she wasn't deserving of him. Eris took this as her suddenly turning him down, but then she'd blurt out, "Please, I happily accept." Being only interested in her research, she couldn't do a single thing a lady ought to do. However, with the Duke hunting monsters, she could make delicious meals for him, so the monster carcasses wouldn't go to waste. She offered him some flasks to use, as that was all she could do, and if it wasn't enough, she asked that he do her the honor of marrying her. The Marshal Raid Knight Captain, Claude, would interrupt them, informing the Duke that the Count was ready to receive him in the drawing room. As Eris left, Claude warned Mel that perhaps it wasn't wise to discuss the matters of their land, or her research with someone she didn't know well. On their way, Eris already knew Claude was eavesdropping on their conversation. Granted, with the notorious blood-mad Duke proposing to the Count's daughter, he could understand why Claude was so guarded. Meeting with Eris, Mel's father asked if he was sure about marrying his daughter. The Duke let him know that the Galbraith family would be honored to have her. Still, the incident at the banquet bothered the Duke. That day was a dreadful bore for Eris. When the mad beast appeared, he was hardly surprised. He only meant to kill it and be done. But when Mel saw him drenched in blood, she didn't fear him, nor look away from his sight. He thought she'd accept him for who he was, but wasn't so certain. Mel's father was also concerned about her research and love for monster meat. But Eris encouraged it. The Count was happy to see he had taken a liking to his daughter. But then the Duke made it clear it wasn't a simple liking. He truly desired her. The Galbraith family was known for adopting its heirs for generations. So the Count asked why he sought a fiancée now. He laughed, hearing the Duke found his daughter soothing and charming. Mel was destined to live in disgrace if she remained in her family's territory where animism was widespread. If nothing changed, the Count planned to send her to a convent. He felt pathetic for being unable to protect his daughter. But Eris swore that when Mel joined the Galbraith family, he would protect her. 10 days after the Duke left, Mel was swarmed by different attendants helping her pack things from the research facility into her room. The Duke demanded she bring everything from the facility and left some knights behind to assist her. Since his visit, they were now officially engaged. She noticed the contract seemed to have powerful magic cast on it. Eris told her not to worry, explaining it was his vow that their engagement wouldn't be broken off. Besides, he wanted to meet her sincerity and resolve. While they stared at each other romantically, her father would cough to interrupt. In their private meeting, Eris revealed it was Mel's father who spread rumors about the voracious villainess amongst high society. By tarnishing her reputation, he protected her research from those who might want to use it for evil. But from this point on, the Duke subtly warned him to refrain from doing so in the future. The two made sure to keep this a secret from Mel. Afterwards, Mon informed her that the dragons would transport the royal moodle by air. He then asked what they'd do with the moodle's golden fur. Mel planned to have it woven into warm coats for her father and brother. She was just about finishing up. Then, she thought about if engaged couples normally moved in together so soon. The Duke didn't want to wait until spring. He wanted her to get acclimated to his lands, since they were unique. Looking at a photo of her mother, Mel wondered what it was like for her. She lost her mother when she was young, and training to be a homemaker was supposedly difficult. Herman then came in, letting her know her escort had arrived. Mel would no longer be returning to this room. At least, as long as the engagement didn't fall through, everything should be alright. She went to inform her father of her departure, but would be surprised to see Lady Celia in the room. Though she was only Mel's stepmother, she still felt inclined to see her daughter off to marriage. Celia told her her father was outside, making sure her things were in order. She then accused Mel of seducing the Duke, and stated that her son, Louis, was the sole heir to the martial raid title, even if Mel and the Duke were to have a child. But to this, Mel would declare devotion to serving the Galbraiths. Lady Celia was upset, saying Mel's demure little face was just like Lady Elise, Mel's mother. She couldn't stand it. Mel was surprised to hear that Celia even knew her mother, and wasn't surprised that Celia didn't like her. Mel never properly acted like a count's daughter should, all while conducting taboo research on monster consumption. But she was glad she got to hear something about her mother in the end. She then met with her father, and seeing the coat she wore, he mentioned Elise had worn this very one when they got married. Mel's mother was from the south, so the martial raid winter definitely came as a shock to her. She was so excited to see her first snow that she caught a cold as soon as she arrived. The Count was sad that he didn't get a chance to talk more about his wife with Mel. Eris would swoop down from his dragon, declaring he had come for her. Kneeling, he'd plant a kiss on her hand and ask how his betrothed was doing. Mel's face went completely red as he teased her. With everything ready, Eris helped her onto the dragon. The Count was looking forward to seeing his daughter during the spring, but the Duke told him it may not be possible because he'd be keeping her until their wedding in the fall, promising to provide everything Mel needed to marry into his family. He guaranteed the Count that he had the strength and status to keep Mel safe, and as for the things she didn't need anymore, he offered to dispose of it for them. Unleashing the magic from his finger, he set it all ablaze in an instant. He then asked Claude to serve the Galbraith family, but the Knight Captain swore he'd never. Meanwhile, Mel was captivated by the flames reaching high into the sky. They seemed like fireworks, celebrating their new lives together. Mel was already missing home, but she couldn't stop thinking about her future. A Galbraith lady's responsibility was to appreciate and soothe her husband. She wasn't sure if she was capable of that, but Eris was already soothed by her mere presence, so he held her closer, leaving her flush. He also enjoyed listening to her talk about monsters. In Galbraith, she could devote herself to research, while he would hunt down monsters for her. The knights who tried the royal moodle had already spread the word, and they were all looking forward to what she would make with more monsters. Leaning on him, Mel thought the Duke was a considerate man. Looking at the beautiful sunset, it was as if the whole world was painted red. Eris commented it was lovely, just like Mel's hair. Though she didn't think the same, he begged to differ. It shone just like this when she activated her magic circle, and the Duke was captivated. Patting her head, he called her beautiful. Mel was flustered, feeling a bit embarrassed. As night fell, the horns on the dragon began glowing brightly. Mel found it cute. Then, Eris explained it was so they could track each other's locations. Mel wondered if these lights looked like twinkling stars from below. Anyone who saw them might mistake them for shooting stars. It was truly magical. But I'm kind of thinking they look like car headlights. They flew over the port town of Avnir, which was under the king's rule. Mel asked if they'd be staying here, but Eris told her they were headed for Fort Rittard, which was on the border. Mel seemed concerned about the fortress, but the Duke assured he would find a room in town where she would be comfortable. But after hearing there were forests and rivers on the border, and that they would be having breakfast and dinner outdoors, she became very excited. It would make it much simpler and easier to acquire food for the dragons. Eris thought she would have preferred to be in the city. However, Mel said not to worry about her. Besides, fish monsters were nice and plump right now, because it was spawning season. Maybe they could even try some monster fruit in the forest. She was very eager to try them all. Eris would be amused by her, then let her know there were Zanus monsters in the river this time of year. Mel didn't have those in her family's territory, so she was very eager to try one. However, the Duke explained that they had to be trapped and pulled from the water, and decided they'd set a trap tonight and check it in the morning. Mel became more thrilled, causing the Duke to blush. A warm, fresh-cooked meal was obviously better than ready-made rations. He was looking forward to breakfast in the morning. The Duke was so kind, it made Mel worry that he was overextending himself. She recalled Kals telling her about how the knights had only been eating dreadful monster meat. She asked Eris if he ever cooked the monsters he slayed. He wouldn't call it cooking because of how rough and gamey it was. They'd often resort to it on extended expeditions when they could no longer hold their hunger. In order not to upset their stomachs, they'd roast the meat thoroughly, but they still ended up with stomach aches. Mel explained they must have ate it without getting rid of the magic toxins. When she asked what type of meat the Duke had tried, he replied the especially tough one was Beluvia. They were all gamey, but the worst was Screamwood, and Gargantus was utterly inedible. It looked like it was engulfed in burning flame and rock. The inside was sludge-like, but he couldn't remember if he actually drank it in his famished state. The Duke then told Mel to hold on tightly, as they would be arriving soon. At Fort Rittard, the guards were informed that the Duke had brought a lady with him, and were told to make arrangements. However, they wouldn't have anything fancy to offer. Mel didn't need any of that, but felt like she was imposing. The Duke then asked that they unpack the items they needed. While she was doing so, he didn't feel it was right to make her stay in the fort overnight. But she wasn't bothered, especially since the fort reminded her of her research facility. It was normal for her to fall asleep on the floor, but Eris wouldn't exactly call that normal. Mel noted that since he was with her, she had nothing to fear. In her room, Eris asked her to get some rest, but she suddenly caught the scent of something tasty. Entering the kitchen, she saw Mullen and Zeth preparing grain porridge. They didn't think it was right for her to be here, but she had the Duke's permission. She assumed the grain porridge wouldn't fill them, so she would propose adding some salted royal noodle. Zeth wasn't convinced, but Mullen told him that Mel had already prepared this special meat for them before. Mel would slice some meat and roast it for him to try. She made sure to remove the magic toxins, letting him know it was safe to eat. Zeth still wasn't willing to try it. Mel prepared some for Mullen as well, and he quickly ate it, complimenting its irresistible taste. The two guys became scared as they heard the Duke's voice. His expression was frightening as he asked Mel if he could have a bite as well. She had already made some for him, asking Eris not to sulk so much. When she tried to give him the meat, he played stubborn, obviously because he wanted to be the first one to eat from her. Wondering what to do, she recalled when the Marshal Raid's 3-year-old son was being picky and refused to eat. So she tried to get Eris to say, but it only made him flustered and still unwilling. Remembering that the nanny also called the boy's name, Mel proceeded to call the Duke's name. While he was shocked, she saw her chance to stick the meat in his mouth. He loved how sweet it was, even though his face didn't express it. Zeth and Mullen were glad to see that the Duke was satisfied. Afterwards, Zeth finally took a bite of his and admitted it tasted good. Mel asked them to cut some meat and vegetables so they could finish preparing the grain porridge. Meanwhile, Eris still seemed upset. By dinner time, the soldiers were amazed at how good the food tasted. They couldn't believe it was the royal noodle meat. Mel was happy to see they all liked it. Eris then mentioned how the dish really brought out the aroma of the fragrant meat. He asked if she did something special, but Mel would explain she had only finely diced the meat and gently fried it. Eris then tried feeding her. Even though she felt a bit shy, he still insisted. After taking the first bite, she wanted to eat the rest herself, but the Duke would still offer to feed her. When they were done, he asked her to address him less formally. Mel then called his name, and he sparkled with joy. Eris had heard from Kaus that most engaged couples addressed each other by their names or terms of endearment. Mel also remembered that her parents called each other by their names. Still, she felt a bit embarrassed calling the Duke by his name instead of Your Grace. Regardless, she had to get used to it by practicing more. Eris proposed she could use a nickname if she wanted, so she called him Rogier, his middle name. And at that moment, his eyes turned gold and he hid them. Feeling worried, Mel called for help. Mullen ran to them, but the Duke assured them it was nothing. He simply lost control of his magic power for a moment. Mel feared it might be because of the monster meat. Mullen explained that the Duke's magic power was strong, and he could store far more than the average person. He would feel much better once he released some of that, and thus decided to catch some Xanis tomorrow. Still, Mel was worried since he had to expend more magic power than the average person. Both monsters and humans had magic power within them. When it accumulated and materialized in monsters, it produced toxins and drove them mad. Mel pondered how it would affect humans. She was scared the Duke might end up like her mother. At a young age, Mel cried beside her sick mother. Unlike monsters, humans had weak and frail bodies. Mel's mother was born with strong magical power, so it frequently went out of control. When she accumulated too much inside her, she'd sometimes get a fever and become bedridden. Mel wished there was something she could have done to help, but her mother promised she'd get better, only to eventually die. People assumed she died to poison from eating monsters, but Mel didn't believe that. Her mother's magic circle was incomplete. The magic power she extracted from monsters accumulated in her body and turned into toxins because she couldn't break it down. Her magic was beautiful. Her hair would glow bright red like fire, and her eyes glittered like jewels. In Mel's eyes, she was as beautiful as a fairy from a fairy tale. Mel loved watching her. While doing research, she found a book explaining loss of control over magic power. Humans, who were weaker than monsters, could not tolerate accumulated magic toxins. Their bodies would fail before they went mad, and they perished. Being a child back then, Mel couldn't save her mother, but now she promised to do her best for Eris and complete her research. Mel would awaken from that dream, noticing it was early in the morning. Seeing the Duke's coat covering her, she recalled pacing up and down her room last night because she was concerned about it. She eventually fell asleep on the floor, and the Duke, finding her, carried her to bed. Mel's face went red with embarrassment. She would meet him in the dining room, and he apologized for making her worry. He confirmed that the magic power in him hadn't materialized. Then he'd hug her, showing that he was fine. He came so close to her face, it was making her heart race. But Mel noticed his temperature was as cold as ice. The Duke had gone into the river earlier, and since it was a cold autumn night, it made Mel even more worried. She feared he'd catch a cold, but just having her hand on his face was enough warmth for him. After returning his coat, he mentioned that they had caught something she would find interesting. Eris pulled her closer, stating they would be warmer this way. Mel couldn't help but wonder if he had decided to act like a spoiled child today. Eris revealed he hadn't killed the Zanas yet, and they would most likely still be swimming in the metal net as they speak. Mel couldn't go back to sleep since it was almost done, so she wanted to start cooking the Zanas right away. However, she wanted him to get some rest first, but Eris said he was feeling fantastic. After all, being with her soothed him. She complained about how dirty she was, but he was even dirtier. Mel was flustered. Then, Eris grabbed her from behind, reminding her to use his name, since they were engaged. When Zeth stepped in, Mel felt like she was saved, but he'd feel a bit out of place seeing how they were flirting. As everyone else gathered, she told them that they would begin cooking the Zanas. But first, she asked someone to procure some oil and flour so that she could batter and fry it. Zeth offered to go fetch the items. After that, Mel met up with Eris to go see the monster. She had drawn a magic circle on oil paper for extracting the magic power from the creatures. Reaching the river, Eris ordered his men to pull up the net, wanting them to be careful because a single blow from the creature could break their bones. Mel's eyes sparkled with excitement as the creature was being pulled out. Upon seeing a Zanas for the first time, she was surprised that it was even bigger than her. She had no idea they were so magnificent. It had all the gravitas one would expect of a monster fish. According to the Duke, this particular one has lived for 7 or 8 years, and they were quite aggressive now since it was spawning season. Mel had seen them in books, but illustrations didn't compare to the real thing. If it bit her with one of those sharp teeth, it could easily tear off her limb. Eris warned her not to get too close. When he was done weakening the creature, Mel decided they would kill it with a blade expertly forged by the Galbraith family's own blacksmith. However, she could barely hold it without falling over. Eris collected the sword, reminding her that he was to handle all the dirty work. However, he had never killed a fish before, so he asked Mel to guide him on how to do it. She told him to blind it first, because Zanas were known to stop moving in the dark. After she covered the monster's eye with a cloth, it stopped struggling. Then, she asked the Duke to stab it behind the eye and above the gills, and then twist his blade. With this, he'd be able to kill it in one strike. Following her instructions, they were able to kill it swiftly. Wow, she's very ethical with this. Afterwards, Mel asked everyone to stand back as she placed all her magic circles on the creature. She never wasted a life, promising to treat the monster's precious existence with care until the very end. Then, she would begin chanting her magic, draining the monster's magic power. She noticed there wasn't much blood, but the magic power inside was so thick. On the other hand, she felt more embarrassed about how much she stood out due to her glowing hair. Mel gave Eris the flask to hold on to. After measuring the Zanas' magic power, she wanted to remove its head, organs, and scales, but she couldn't keep asking the Duke to do it. So, she requested that he teach her how to behead monsters. Patting her head, he called her Melfi. Ooh, he's got a pet name for her now. Then told her that he beheaded countless monsters, but he enjoyed nothing more than cooking monsters with her. Likewise, she felt the same. In her family's territory, she did most of the cooking and research alone. She never had fun like this with the hunters and knights, helping her break down the monsters. Mel cheered them to chop off only the head and remove the scales with the skin. Eris would ask her how he should behead the fish, and she told him to start left of where he stabbed earlier. Then, he'd have to cut diagonally from the gills to behind the dorsal fin. It was quite a challenging angle, but with the Duke's magical eyes, he cleaved the head of the Zanas with one clean strike. Mel was impressed by how skilled he was with the blade. The cut was so clean, leaving the fish perfectly intact. Even Mullen was enamored by the Duke's skill. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call his perfectly efficient moves divine. Hearing how impressed Mel was with his skills, Eris became bashful. She thought he was so cute whenever he did this, but he always sulked when she mentioned it, so she decided not to. As the sun rose, they moved on to removing the creature's organs. Mel told the Duke that the head and organs didn't seem edible, so he proceeded to burn it with his fire magic. Apparently, he had come up with this spell to help people struggling to dispose of monsters. Returning, Zeth informed them that they'd have to cook outside because the pots couldn't fit into the kitchen. Mel felt this was a better choice. Then, she asked if anyone had cleaned a fish before. Unlike other beasts, their flesh was soft, so she wanted to remove the skin by slicing it off. Ambry told her he sheared delicate furs on a daily basis, so she asked for his assistance. He proceeded to slice off the skin so perfectly that there wasn't a shred of meat left on it. Mel felt it would be a waste to chop up something Ambry sliced so beautifully, but he didn't mind. They started boiling the oil until the temperature was right. Mel noted that one pot would be hot, while the other would be cooler. Then, she'd fry the fish in 2 stages. Eris wanted to lend a hand as well, so she asked him to watch the hotter pot. For the batter, since they didn't have eggs, they would dissolve spices mixed with flour into water and use that instead. Then, they'd dip the chopped Xanis into the mixture and begin frying it in the cooler pot. They started with one as a test. They'd fry it until it was golden brown, then remove it with a perforated wooden ladle. Mel mentioned that if it went until it was cooked through at this stage, it would turn out dry, so they needed to let the residual heat cook it. To finish off, the fish would be briefly fried at high temperature. This would quickly burn off any moisture in the batter, leaving a crisp exterior and juicy interior. Eris apologized to Mel because his first try didn't turn out so great, but she let him know that he merely burned off too much moisture. It didn't mean the fish was inedible. She asked him to feed her the darker pieces, remarking that they looked delicious. Opening her mouth, ready to be fed, the Duke was flustered by her cuteness. She also asked him to blow on it because it was still hot, and after doing so, she took a bite, which left her ecstatic at how the flesh was so toothsome. Toothsome, huh? Means extremely pleasing to taste. Not sure I really get it. The smell of the salty, crispy batter paired perfectly with chewy meat. She then told the Duke that the plump, spring meat was irresistible. Eris quickly took a bite for himself and saw she was right. Mel was embarrassed, seeing that he ate her half-eaten food. After that, he went ahead to try one of the successful pieces, and with how good that tasted, he told her to quickly try it. Mel was thrilled once more by how fluffy it was. The meat was so tender, it flaked apart as she chewed. She could eat these forever. Now they were both conflicted because they both wanted the tender and toothsome ones. Eris suggested they make both, since people could prefer one or the other. Mel thought letting people eat their preferences was a good idea too. They had plenty of Xanis, and a crispier texture could be taken into the field. When they were done, she thanked the Duke, expressing how much fun she had when he was with her. They wouldn't be eating outside because Mel had asked the chef to prepare bread and vegetables in the Great Hall. Then, she would ask Mullen to escort the Duke and make sure the finest meal was prepared for the man of the hour. She was gonna head over after disposing of the oil. She felt guilty for making him do all this for her, and wanted him to get a lot of rest. Seth and Ambry then approached her, offering to help her clean up, so they could all enjoy the delicious meal. Mel gave them samples of the belly meat to try. Since it wasn't fit for frying, she didn't want to serve it to the others. They loved the taste and said it would taste even better with some sour fruit juice. So, Mel urged them to hurry before all the fruit was gone. Entering the Great Hall, Mel was amazed at the sight of everyone enjoying the meal. The Duke then called her over, telling her to eat as much as she could before they continued their journey. He would then wrap a piece of fried fish and lettuce and eat it. Mel tried the same, stunned at how fresh it tasted. Zeth then gave her some of the cabo fruit they were talking about. She would squeeze the fruit juice on the fish, and upon taking a bite, her eyes sparkled with joy, in disbelief over how good it tasted. She thought it would be great for tired digestive systems or small appetites. Eris wondered if it was really that good. He wasn't sure if he enjoyed sour flavors because he only had them when he was drinking. Taking a bite, he jolted over the sourness. It wasn't bad, but maybe a bit too sour for his taste buds. The following day, they packed some sandwiches to eat on the way. As she instructed, Zeth and Ambry salted and froze the remaining Xanis. With this, it would last longer. Considering they still had a long way to Galbraith, Eris ordered his men to be alert, so they wouldn't have any accidents. Then, they took to the skies. Mel was eager to see Galbraith, which would be a whole new land for her. Eris told Mel to let him know when she wanted to take a break, but she was fine, and more worried about him, since he barely got any sleep last night. But the Duke let her know he still had some cabo fruit, which would help him stay awake. She thought he didn't like them, considering how he reacted to the sour taste during their meal. She insisted he needed more rest, and suggested that she could ride with Mullen or Zeth. But Eris refused. He told her he was joking about using the fruits to stay awake. Instead, he actually brought the cabo because she liked them. The Duke began to pout, then told her not to rely on other men. Mel would chuckle, seeing how nervously he said it. She wondered what the Duke's life was like in the Galbraith's land. All the Galbraith knights she'd met so far adored and respected him. They had the warmth of a big family built around the Duke, which made her think about what the people of his duchy were like. She then asked Eris what kind of towns and cities were in the Galbraith lands. He told her there were originally 30, but they've whittled down since 17 years ago. Now, only 12 settlements remained, all because of the Great Famine and drought. In Galbraith, they called it the Cataclysm. During that time, the previous Duke passed suddenly, and he was chosen to become the next Duke. It was unusual for a Duke to perish during a famine. Mel couldn't imagine it was an illness or some sort of unfortunate accident. Eris then mentioned there was an unprecedented number of monsters that appeared in the Urzenye woods. The monsters couldn't be cold fast enough, and their magic power welled. Large numbers of blood-mad monsters beset Galbraith. But of course, the previous Duke fulfilled his duty. Although they lost many knights, it was worth it because no other nation suffered any damage. Mel wondered why reinforcements didn't come to help them, but with the catastrophe affecting the whole nation, no one had forces to spare. The Knights of Galbraith swear on an oath to give their lives for their kingdom. Both Eris and the knights who looked up to him had also taken this oath. It was the fate of those who inherit the Galbraith name. They staked their lives, fighting monsters to defend the kingdom of Lengdeus, to prevent a second cataclysm. Mel began to realize that Eris was always prepared to die, and he had accepted that hopeless fate. But she wasn't going to have it. Her mother had died, like she was resigned to her fate the same way. Mel wouldn't accept this, which was why she was going to continue her research, so no one would have to suffer again. If Mel was also at the mercy of fate, she wanted to think it was fate that brought them together. The Duke took her hand and lightly kissed her head as he apologized, saying it's not like he didn't value his own life. Feeling it may not serve as an oath since she wasn't a knight, Mel took the Duke's hand, kissing it, and letting him know that the magic circle she was researching would definitely be useful to him. She would vow to do her best to protect him and his knights from harm, and asked Eris to consider living his life with her. Eris was stunned by her words. Still, it didn't mean he'd let her get exposed to danger. They both wanted to protect each other. Though Mel's methods were different from his, she wanted to protect him and the others. Her gaze was earnest. Flustered, she told him not to say it wasn't possible, and her words delighted Eris. But he didn't know what to say. He didn't want to make her sad, but always thought it was a matter of time. He then decided to tell her an old story. Of course, no matter how little, Mel wanted to hear about him, and he too was dying to know what she thought of him. And though they were just engaged, he felt a powerful desire not to disappoint her. Eris's desire to hide the pathetic parts of himself and his desire for her to know everything about him were fighting within him. But there was no changing the past now. The Duke revealed that he was born as the second son of the previous king of Lengdeus, meaning he was a prince. When he was much younger, his older brother, Maxim, bore the same golden hair and deep purple eyes of King Maximus, the seventh monarch, famed for his wisdom. It earned him the nickname, the Second Coming of the Sage. Meanwhile, Eris's sight, which made him store magic in his eyes, caused quite a stir. He praised his brother, complimenting how clever and quick of a learner he was, unlike himself, who was always losing control of his magic power and destroying the castle. After an incident where Eris lost control, he caught a fever. Mel was so glad he ended up alright, because losing control of one's magic power could kill them. Eris could tell Mel lost her mother in the same way, and wondered if he should wait for her to tell him about it. Later on, by the time he was strong enough to withstand the magic inside him, the only place left for him in the castle was with the knights. At the same time, Kaus approached him, mentioning how the officials and servants feared him. However, he was the first knight to pledge his loyalty to Eris. He could have followed his father's footsteps and become a royal guard, but he was a dependable companion who followed the Duke to Galbraith's lands. Eris asked Mel if she wanted to hear more, noting that the rest of the story wasn't so nice. But it detailed what happened 17 years ago. Mel wasn't sure, since it was one of their nation's secrets. But Eris felt it was alright to tell her, since their engagement had the king's approval. It was quite a surprise for him. The Duke had never wanted to marry anyone, but quickly changed his mind once he met Mel. 17 years ago, to prevent succession dispute, Mel's father, the previous king, made him the next Duke of Galbraith and subject of his older brother, who would inherit the throne. At the time, the kingdom was weakened by the drought and famine gripping the domain. The nobles were on the brink of rebelling, leaving the king with no other choice but some of the nobility advocated for the extreme measure of making Eris the crown prince and sending him to attack other nations. They wanted to expand their territory by conquest under a magically powerful prince with his sight. Due to this, internal conflict broke out between the pro and anti-war factions. Kaus's father was dragged into it, resulting in his death. Eris eavesdropped on some maids gossiping about the fighting over food and water, and they heard monsters were attacking too. He quickly rushed to his elder brother, agreeing to inherit the Galbraith name so Maxim would become king. He didn't want a tragedy like this to happen again. Though the situation was sad, Maxim agreed with his brother, and so he announced to the people he would be succeeding the king to end the suffering as quickly as possible. Years later, he told his brother that hunting monsters couldn't be the Galbraith Knights' sole purpose. He wanted to give them something more. So, Maxim proposed they earn a post with the Royal Guard after 5 years of service. Kaus also mentioned they were exploring uses for the monsters they've hunted. Some monsters were sources of rare materials, so it'd be a waste to simply dispose of them. They wanted a crown to buy whatever was usable, and Maxim agreed to pay handsomely, depending on the quality of the material. Though Eris felt this only worked because he and the king were brothers. Mel believed it was a wonderful system. It worked because so many monsters lived in Galbraith, and they had strong knights to exterminate them. The Duke was still willing to lay down his life in case another cataclysm occurred. But instead of that, Mel suggested they look for a way to do something about the cataclysm itself. There was a limit to how many monsters Eris could hunt down. She refused to have him sacrifice himself. If her new research into extracting magic toxins was successful, and monsters stopped going mad and stopped attacking people, then Eris would have no reason to risk his life. Plus, if she learned to extract magic toxins live, then maybe she could make the meat of mad monsters delicious. Moved by her words, Eris kissed Mel's forehead again, making her completely lose it. After the passion she expressed for him, he couldn't restrain himself. Saying how he was seriously considering his life with her left Mel even more of a gushing mess. He then pointed to the Urzine woods below them, letting her know they were almost at Galbraith. The forest was so massive, even he could get lost without a map. Mel couldn't believe this forest was infested with fiends. This land yielded magical ore. Ley lines and ore vines lie deep underground. And with the soil and air so full of magic, practically only monsters could live here. Eris then pointed Mel to the Galbraith River, their largest one. To the east was the Calberth River, which feeds it, and it splits 3 ways from there. Mel wondered if the river tends to concentrate in one area, but Eris told her this place was probably special. The snow melt from the Galbraith Range in the distance flowed underground until it surfaced here. However, it all dried up during the cataclysm 17 years ago. If a river this incredible dried, Mel thought Marshall Raid wouldn't have stood a chance. She also wondered if the Duke knew how such a widespread drought occurred in the kingdom of Langdeus. But before she could ask, Eris told her to turn around because the way she was sitting was dangerous. Suddenly, he got word that a flock of Bourguignon was on their tail, and there were about 200 of them closing in. So, Eris decided to take point, and he needed 2 knights without cargo to bring up the rear. Zeth and Eric agreed to handle that. Eris would give Mel some wind goggles, apologizing for how things went with Galbraith, but she understood. He explained that the Bourguignon used an acceleration spell to hunt in flocks. However, it was rare for them to attack a group. Once Mel was ready, the Duke unleashed his acceleration magic, flying at an incredible speed to get away from the monsters. Getting closer to the ground, it looked like they were about to crash. Here we go. Conflict time. I'm ready for it. Subscribe to keep up with next week's part, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.